Joining me from London is writer, broadcaster and commentator Esther Krakue. Esther, great to see you. What's amazing here is not just the economic havoc, of course, it's that Donald Trump is causing so much pain to America's traditional allies, countries that back it in war, and he doesn't seem to care that losing friends could one day prove disastrous. Or do you think this will all end up sweet?
Well, no one does sledgehammer diplomacy, should I put it, as like Donald Trump. And you're right, by painting sort of allies, traditional allies and foes alike, he's kind of blurred the boundaries. Now the world is paying attention, the world has sat up. You know, it's clear that Trump wants to kind of basically almost correct tariff irregularities around the world with countries that trade with the US, which is fair enough. I mean, the EU, for example, on average weighted tariffs tariffs about 5% of what the average tariff the EU imposes on American goods is about 5%. But actually, if you take in the regulatory barriers to trade, it's far more significant. So Donald Trump is saying, listen, this is a once in a generation opportunity to correct this. However, by placing disproportionate tariffs on countries ranging from 20% to 40%, you clearly see that there's actually a lot of imbalance here. Now, the question is whether he will actually suspend this for 90 days. I mean, there are rumors coming out of the White House saying before these tariffs actually come into effect, he's going to suspend it for 90 days to bring countries to the table to negotiate, to correct this. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you look at Britain, for example, we're asking ourselves, actually, has our Prime Minister, has Westminster ever even thought about questioning why we're buying so much cheap stuff from China, but how much do they actually buy from us? And if you see the sort of trade deficits that we run with these sorts of countries that produce a lot of cheap, often inferior goods, you should ask, are we actually disadvantaging British businesses by not trying to correct that imbalance? However, the way that Trump is doing it is basically painting friends and foes alike. And I don't think you can underestimate the economic impact of bruised egos. That being said, so for example, if you have British tourists saying, actually, we're going to go to Japan on holiday instead of the US, there are economic hits to that. And Donald Trump is making a huge gamble and expending a lot of political capital on this. So we'll just have to see how this will turn out. But the world is certainly paying attention now, which I'm sure is what Donald Trump wanted.
Yeah, well, when you see how important America's allies have been to it to, make some of its foreign interventions have a moral patina, like British and American troops helped the Americans in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Korea and where else. I mean, I think he's making a big mistake trashing all that and treating it like just one big business proposition. How's your Prime Minister handling this?
Well, Keir Starmer is looking slightly less incompetent, which is not really saying very much because the bar is in hell. However, he's also said that he's going to ease some of the fines on car companies that don't meet the electric vehicle quotas and extending the use of EV mandate from 2030 to 2035, which is absolutely not going to do anything. He's been kind enough to say that actually we're not going to fine car companies £15,000 per car that doesn't meet our standards. It's now just going to be £12,000, trying to dress it up as if he's not committing economic suicide by keeping up with this net zero madness. And the reality is the UK just cannot keep up with this ridiculous net zero mandates. We don't even have a third of the infrastructure needed to make electric vehicles commercially viable. So imagine you're driving in the Scottish Highlands and your car just stops because you have no fuel, you have no power, and the next electric vehicle charging station is somewhere near Glasgow. I mean, it's ludicrous. And Parliament knows this. I think they're trying to take a softly approach. But the reality is the world has changed, and the fact that we've not been self-sufficient for a long time is coming back to bite us in the derriere, considering the Americans are not going to be playing the nice game anymore.
Yeah, it's not like you can get out a jerry can, to hitch a ride to the nearest charging station and bring back a jerry can full of electricity. Doesn't quite work that way. I think people are cottoning on to this. I'm just wondering, I don't know whether it's in Britain like it is here. You get people that think that Donald Trump can do no right, and you get people thinking Donald Trump can do no wrong, and they slam each other when clearly he must be in the middle. I mean, is it as bad in Britain as it is here, the polarisation over Donald Trump?
Yes, slightly. I mean, I think when you have some almost like a martyr figure in politics, critical thinking goes out the window. There are people that have, on the one hand, Trump derangement syndrome, that everything he does, he could cure world hunger, and he'd still be a villain. And then on the other hand, he can do no wrong. And obviously, the truth falls somewhere in the middle. I think what's important is for countries to look to themselves to see how they can help themselves. The only reason why the UK, for example, is
Yes.
caught in as bad a situation as we are is because we've neglected our energy policy. We have the most expensive energy in the developed world. You can't produce anything in Britain. It costs too much to employ people. Everything is inefficient. Infrastructure is crumbling. These are things that our politicians could have dealt with decades ago if they had a bit of forward thinking, but they didn't do that. And it's the same with the Ukraine war. Europe was happy to depend on the Americans for its national defense instead of doing its most basic duty by its citizens to protect themselves. So these are all things that we can look internally and see how we can correct it, as opposed to blaming the orange man across the pond.